Welcome to Manu Forti Ministries presents Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny. I am your host, Reggie Key, and today I have with me Alana Walls. Alana, how you doing?
I am doing very well, thank you.
Good deal. I'm very happy to have you on this panel today. I guess it's not really a panel because it's just you, but I'm happy to be talking to you face to face because I've been observing you on Facebook for a while, and I feel like I'm starting to get some clues, some contextual clues, if you will, about what it is that you've been put on this planet to do. And I just want to see if the clues that I'm picking up are actually true or not. Whether they're true or not, I believe that we are going to have a great discussion about just what the workshop says, how common genius is to all of us and how common it is to see it in you. So my first question to you is, Alana, do you consider yourself to be a genius?
I would not consider myself to be a genius. I would consider myself to be intelligent and skilled and creative and willing to explore multiple venues.
Okay. All right. So the multiple venues part is interesting because it's the multiple venues of genius that people, I think we've been programmed not to think of it as having multiple venues, but we've been programmed to think of it as academic. We've been programmed to think of it as it relates to GPA. We think of IQ, right? And while it's true that those can be markers of genius, that's just markers for one type of genius. There's
I agree.
of types of genius that go unaddressed and unspoken of. And it's been kind of my duty, I feel, over the past year or years since the book has come out to really begin to identify and unlock genius in the common areas of our life. To be honest, I can't claim to have come up with this idea. I linked up with this guy, his name is Bruce George, a couple of years ago. He was one of the founding members of Def Poetry Jam. And I was contributing online back in the day, and him and I connected that way. And he started this movement called Genius is Common, where he's like, you know what? We have to reappropriate this word and take it away from this elitist status that we've given it, because in that elite status, we disassociate it from ourselves and discount what we have that's special and unique about us to contribute to society.
And I would totally agree with that. I don't believe that I am like that person who would be considered like a genius in a traditional sense.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that I didn't do well in school at times. But I'm motivated differently. My motivation comes from being able to see people feel good about themselves, see people learn, and see people feel motivated and inspired and realize that, they have potential. And, this is probably why my career started in traditional education, and it has moved into working as an educator within a faith-based organization.
Okay.
So, and I was the kid who had ADHD, and my parents were kind of told that, but they never really got me tested. So I struggled a little bit, and when I was in college learning about it because I wanted to be a teacher, I was like, oh man, that's me. So when I became a teacher, I understood those kids a little bit more, and didn't treat them like there was something wrong with them.
Yep.
And I will proudly say I am the adult with ADHD. And I tell people it's a gift and a curse, just like anything else. And when I would explain it to my students, it's like wearing glasses or anything else. everybody has challenges. It's just a matter of how you deal with it.
Yeah. Alana, this is going to be a good interview because you're tapping into some of the stories and examples that I have that begin to shift the paradigm about how we think of genius, deal exactly with ADHD, learning styles, and things like that. So I'm trying to be composed right now and not get
Are
completely
you getting
flipped out.
excited?
Yeah, I'm getting excited though. First and foremost, before we go another further, can you let the audience know what's your shirt say?
It says education, not incarceration. And this is about the fact that too many children of color, especially Black children, are being pushed out of school and into some type of, not necessarily incarceration, but oftentimes incarceration. But they're being removed from the educational environment, whether it's suspension, in-school suspension, detention, whatever, because their behaviors are being misconstrued as threatening. They're being criminalized simply because they're being misunderstood or because of the color of their skin, even if their counterparts are doing the exact same thing.
Oh, okay. See, you keep, all right. If you see me shift like this, that means I'm trying not to jump out my seat. Because you're getting all the way into the sauce. And I'm trying to figure out right now, do I continue to go how I normally go, or do I jump ahead to where you're already at?
Well, if we need to have another conversation at another time, I'm more than willing.
Okay. No, we can
I
fit it
work
all
from home full time for my job, which is a beautiful gift. So I am always willing to have these conversations.
Okay.
Especially about what happens in the school system to our children.
I'm gonna stick to the script though, because we're gonna come back. You're gonna see. You're gonna be like, wow, wait, just wait. All right. Okay. So here's me getting back on track. I love everything that you said thus far, by the way. So I feel like when we've received these negative labels, they traumatize us. Like, I've never been diagnosed with ADHD, but I know plenty of people who have. And there's something that happens to each of us where somebody in the course of our formative years says something about us that doesn't affirm us, but it kind of tries to put us down. And from that point, we begin to process who we are differently. And that carries on into adulthood. It's traumatizing, right? And it carries on into adulthood, so that when we do get these other affirmations that then come later on in life, we're like, yeah, I don't know if that's me though, because we've been carrying this load that we were never meant to carry for so long. The load that many of us carry, one of the loads deals with what society programs into us to tell us what's acceptable and what's not. So in that regard, let me ask you another question. Who comes to mind when you think of this word genius? First person.
Barack Obama.
Barack Obama. Okay.
I mean, there were a whole bunch of people that popped into my head, but he always stands out to me because he found so many unique ways to continue to position himself in ways that he would be seen as special, and he would be able to affect change. Initially on a small scale.
And he did it navigating a system that wasn't built for him though.
Right. And it wasn't his home community. And, you know, he believed in something. And, you know, the ability to believe in something and then work to make it happen is a unique thing that a lot of people don't have.
A lot of people don't have it. You're exactly right. And well, they possess the elements and the components to do it, but they haven't given themselves license to execute.
Right.
For whatever reason, right?
And he wasn't going to take no as an answer. He knew that the community deserved something better, and he wasn't going to settle for anything less. And he knew he had the resources and had the ability to access the resources that would allow for better things to happen. And he continued to do that over and over and over again. And because he was able to show people that he was trustworthy, and he could communicate his passion, which is extremely important, because people have to know that you're excited, that you care, and that this is something that you're passionate about. He got people to keep buying into his plans, and then he kept making things happen. And so he kept moving up the ranks. And, early on, I was like, yeah, this man is going to be our first Black president. This was long before the primaries.
Yeah.
I had an opportunity to hear him speak in person, and I was so inspired. It was like, what else can I do?
Yeah.
Like I wanted to go and just do anything and everything I could in my community. And I've never been inspired by a politician.
Right.
So that's different.
I'm saying something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I like the fact that, so there's something very interesting that's kind of developed as I've been doing these interviews one-on-one. Typically I do them in workshops of 25, 30 plus people, but I've been doing them for over the past 6 months one-on-one. And it's something very interesting that I've come to see. When people begin to ascribe, here's the dog. It's all right. When people begin to ascribe genius to somebody that they can identify with, they've drawn themselves that much closer to being able to see it in themselves. But when people ascribe genius to somebody that looks nothing like them, then they're more prone to stay in this mode of, no, I'm not genius. Do you know the number one answer that I've gotten in all the years that I've been doing the workshops and everything? The number one answer probably went through your mind, but I'm glad that you said Barack Obama instead. The number one
that?
You said, who was that?
I'm muting it. I'm muting because Giggles is all of a sudden demanding my attention, even though she's had it all day long. Sorry.
No, it's fine. The number one answer has been Albert Einstein.
Well, and that makes sense, because he was, I would agree, a genius in on some level, in the traditional sense of the word, because of what he accomplished in terms of like math and science, even though at the same time, he had some learning disabilities.
He did. Talk about them, please.
I don't remember exactly what they were, but, if people were aware of that, they probably, because he wasn't told he was a genius. He was told,
you might want to work with your hands.
Sorry, you have struggles. Yep. Sorry. And I don't, can you remind me of what his challenges were?
I don't know the exact name for them, but I know that his parents, he got that little note home to his parents, like, yeah, you might want to make sure he gets into vocational skills, because he's not cutting it in the system of school that we have, right?
Yeah.
And can you imagine if he had it, because I think his parents read this letter in front of him. If he would have accepted what was being put on him, what was being labeled on him, we would have been denied what his contributions are today. Even when he got into college, the professors were like, you're not thinking, you're not processing this information how we want you to process it. You don't fit in here. because what he would do is he'd be like daydreaming, was, you know, they would think he was daydreaming. He'd be looking out the window, but what he was visualizing is, what would it look like to ride a beam of light from the sun to the earth? And in that visualization, he came up with the theory of relativity. But because he was thinking outside of the box, the professors were like, we don't know what to do with you. Like, you don't fit in here.
And, you know, the people who bring us like these innovative ideas that have like changed our society, they're not the people who think like everybody else. Because the people who think like everybody else do things like everybody else. And you have to be willing to do something different in order to come up with these ideas. You can't see the world the way everybody else does if you want to change the world. Yeah. Because you have to see the potential for something different. You know, it's just like you think of like Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, like these aren't people who thrived in traditional education. Nope. And it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with traditional education, right, but it doesn't mean that that is the thing for everybody. It doesn't define. And I used to say this to my students, and I was, you know, a teacher and a principal in the K-12 school system. And it drove some of my teachers crazy and some of my coworkers, because I'm saying things that I guess they felt like were hypocritical to the work that we were doing. But what we were actually doing was setting up some kids for failure by saying, you have to do this, you have to be this. But really, and I guess what made it easier for me to be able to say that is because really, like, every Black child, and, you know, being that at some point in time I was a Black child, you know, we were told that we had to be something that we weren't. Right. We were told that our way of storytelling, our way of talking to each other, just our way of being at times with our friends and our family outside of school was not acceptable, was not appropriate. Right. You know, and, you know, school is based on middle school white values. So, you know, really, it's not built for the majority of people. Yeah. And then, you know, then you talk about, you know, a lot of these elitist, wealthy private schools, you know, most of us would not survive in that environment. I mean, who knows what the rules are to even survive there? Because most of us haven't been in those environments. Right. And, you know, education is something different for them. You know, it's about pedigree. It's more of like a badge of honor versus something to help you move forward. And that's the way we saw it. And for other people, it was still something that was in the way of them ensuring that their family was fed. Yeah. So, you know, the traditional educational system is not viewed the same for everyone. It doesn't serve the same purpose for everyone. And so if we value it differently, then, you know, there's no way we can all get the same benefit out of it. And then if somebody is, like, the popular term is neurodivergent. Wow, okay. You know, people like to, that seems like it's more of like a millennial or what is it, Generation Z type term. Okay. But, you know, it's just like, but everybody thinks a little bit differently. There's always, everybody has something about them that's a little bit different. Some people, it's just more obvious than others. Yeah. And like, so what? I guess I've gotten to a point in my life where I'm like, so what if I'm different? And, you know, there's a point in our lives where being different was problematic. Right. But we're at a point now in our 40s where being different is actually valued. Like people want you to think differently because they need different in order for their organizations and their companies to survive, especially now after the pandemic. Well, we're even after
everything is on
we're
its
still in it.
Everything
And
is
you know, and so like when I talk to like my coworkers and I say stuff like, you know what, don't worry, like I live outside the box. And you know, and they're just like, ha ha ha, you know, or when I talk about me having ADHD or whatever, or if I'm going to Alanify something, they know exactly what that means.
Yeah.
And so regardless of like some of the jokes that might happen, because I'm never completely serious really in any situation. They know that what is going to come is something that's going to be fun and engaging, like for our members, and is going to help them learn something and get them excited about it in a different way, just like it did when I was working in middle school teaching math, because I hated math at that point. And I figured like if I could do for some kids what I had a teacher do for me, then, you know, mission accomplished. Because I don't need them to be geniuses in math. I need them to have basic skills so they can function appropriately within their lives and not be the person, like, let's say if they're a cashier who can't count change if the cash register isn't working, things like that. So,
and see, how I'm defining genius is how you're executing it, because genius first looks at how have I been constructed, how have I been built, how have I been designed. I embrace that. It's not a detriment to me, it's who I am. And then you look outward to see how can I impact others in the community with what I have, and then more importantly, how can I reach those who operate in the same way that I operate so that they don't feel marginalized and alienated, right? Because
but you know, like for most of my formative years, people tried to get that out of me. And it was so frustrating because it was just like, but this is who I am. And it was like, why do you not want me to be who I am? And I didn't change. You know, it was just like, I'm still going to be me. Like, if you need me to do whatever for this brief period of time, fine. But ultimately, me being who I was helped kids to be successful in my class as a math teacher. It helped students feel like they could be successful in school. It helped some kids who felt like they didn't have a reason to come to school, you know, to actually show up. And because like what, like the one thing like that my father always told us was that we are here to serve. And it was just a matter of figuring out what your way is. And education was my way and is my way. And, you know, what that looks like for people, or looks like for me and for them and our interactions together, is like, it can be fun. Like sometimes you don't even have to know that you're learning anything. And actually, that's probably some of the best times when you don't even realize that you learned something. Because you were having so much fun. So
I want to share with you a quote that I think will really launch us to the next part of the interview. It purportedly comes from Einstein. Facebook now is telling me it doesn't come from Einstein. It doesn't really matter, but it's related to what we've been talking about. So let me know if you've heard this quote before, and then let me know how you internalize it. What is it saying to you? Okay, you ready for it? All right, goes like this. If you judge a fish by how well it can climb a tree, it will spend its entire life thinking it's stupid.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
I can tell by the way you went down like that. I was like, oh, she heard it before. Okay.
Mhm.
How do
Yeah,
you, what is that saying to you?
everything isn't for everybody. It's just like, the fact that the fact that there even has to be like a conversation with in high school about the push for like career education, not just college. And it's like, I do believe everybody needs some kind of higher education.
Yeah.
And I don't mean college,
Right.
but it's like you need some kind of specialty training, like you need some skill, but it doesn't mean college, and that's okay. And but it's like I went to college and I believe that I have a master's degree, and I believe I am a good educator. But just because I have those degrees doesn't mean that you need me to fix your car.
Right.
Please don't ask me. Please don't ask me to do any electrical work, any plumbing, because I'm going to mess up your stuff.
Yeah.
And, we need to be able to identify the gifts that people possess and cultivate those, especially with our kids, because people are often so busy trying to have them live the dreams that they've set for them, as opposed to helping them figure out who they want to be.
Yeah.
And, we need to help them to learn that path. It's funny. There was a kid that I had during my last year as a principal, which was in the job I had before my current job. And he was in the foster system for many years. He got in trouble a lot in school. And the teachers hated that I spent a lot of time with him. But I ended up being the reason that he even communicated to me that he was motivated to come to school. And so they were like, well, what about the kids who do the right thing? Shouldn't you should spend time with them. They deserve it. I was like, so you're telling me that only kids who make good choices deserve my time? Right. So that doesn't make any sense. Like, really, it is like, everybody deserves attention from the principal. But this kid needed a different kind of attention. And the thing that he was interested in doing after high school was to be a tattoo artist.
Okay.
I don't have a clue what the path is for that. But I did notice that there was a tattoo convention going on the weekend of his 18th birthday.
Oh, nice.
And again, he's in the foster care system. So another teacher that also had a good relationship with him, he and I took this boy to the tattoo convention, and we gave him assignments while he was there.
Okay.
He had to interview different people to find out, like, what is the path? What do you do? What does he need to stop doing or start doing? Things like that, because I can't guide him, because I don't know what to do. But if he said, even if he said, like, I want to be a lawyer or a doctor, even though those aren't professions that I'm in, we've been taught, what the path is for those things, and who to access. And he did exactly what we asked him to do. And he was so excited.
I bet he was. And
people at the school were so disgusted that we did this. So, like, they were telling on it. They were like reporting this to the board president, who actually had an issue with my boss with the company I worked for, because we were managing the school.
Okay.
And it was like, we have a responsibility to help these kids, be able to fulfill their dreams and set them up for success. If I don't know the path, shouldn't I take him to the resources that are going to help him.
Yeah.
Like he turned 18 and he was able to learn and he was inspired.
Yep.
And people had a problem with that because this was a kid who often made bad choices, but he didn't have anybody to guide him differently.
You know what the messed up part is though? I don't mean to, I'm sorry to cut you off, but you mentioned in this choice, the bad choices again, right? If you're put in a system that was not built with you in mind, you're going to make bad choices relative to the system. The good choices that those other students were making were good choices that fit within the system. The system prompts certain people to reply to it a certain way. When you reply to it like the system wants you to, then you're rewarded with success. You can go on. Those other kids didn't need your attention because the system was already giving them the attention and the feedback that they needed to let them feel like they were accomplished. It was this one young man who the system was not built for that needed some affirmation to be like, yeah, look, I realize that this is not your lane. Let's find what your lane is so that you can then make the right choices within the lane of what you've been gifted to do. Because if you would have put some of those kids who are making the right choices into that tattoo convention, they would have failed. They would have been making wrong decisions all day because it's not their lane.
They would have been bored. I mean, there have been so many things. Yeah, it's just, again, because everything isn't for everyone.
It's not.
And it's okay.
Yep.
It's so okay. Yeah.
So here's the thing with this quote though, right? So this fish out of water. We know that fish, I don't know that you will encounter anyone that has lived on this planet for any amount of time that will look at a fish and say to it, oh, you should be climbing trees. Everyone knows when you see a fish what its element is, right? Its element is water. You can look at it and see how God designed it and see that it's supposed to be in water. It has fins, it has gills, it has scales, it's streamlined. But when you take this fish out of its element and then try to get it to perform something that God did not design for it to do, you're going to be like, oh, you're dumb. Like this fish is dysfunctional. This fish is not successful, right? And if we, obviously the fish represents students for this particular example, students or any people that are in a system that wasn't built for them. That tree was not built for a fish, right? The tree represents a system. Somebody is coming along and saying, you need to fit into this tree, you need to fit into this system. And in the process, you're killing this person. Like, you know what happens if a fish stays out of water long enough? It's going to die.
It will.
And the thing that I'm seeing is dying genius all around me because we're not looking at how people are built and saying, let's get you where you are successful. Because I guarantee you, if this was a real life event, a real life scenario, and somebody would pick this fish up, carry it to the water and put it in, they would see instantly what its genius is. They would see instantly what it was designed to do. And I would dare that person to jump in the water and try and keep up with that fish. That person would fail. You're not going to be able to keep up with this fish once you put it back where it belongs in this element, because it'll thrive in such a way that you can't keep up with it. And that's what we have to begin to do with everyone, is figure out like, what's your lane? What's your element? What were you meant to thrive in, by recognizing what their passion, talent, and purpose are, right? And so how God gave me these three things, these three components, is done in such a way that it unlocks genius. In fact, because I see dying genius all around me, it resuscitates, revitalizes, and resurrects the genius that's being, for lack of a better word, is being choked out of people.
You know what that makes me think about?
What's that?
One of my favorite movies as a kid, The Never-Ending Story.
Oh, that was my jam.
Because, it was all about, the nothing, which was like everything that was happening in the world that was like stifling creativity and like we need people to be able to like you said, to be able to be who they are. And it doesn't mean that people don't need basic skills or to know how to interact appropriately socially or in various situations, but but to also realize it's okay to just be who you are. And there's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah. Why are we stigmatizing
so that
people?
Nothing doesn't take over.
Yeah. Like, why are we stigmatizing and traumatizing people for how they've been designed? This fish is literally, I have a picture of it. I will pull it up, but I don't want to jam up what we're doing. But it's like a little fish on this big tree, and you can look at the fish, and it's looking like this doesn't feel right, but this is what I'm being told to do. And why do that to a fish? Why traumatize this fish? It's flopping around trying to figure out how to climb a tree that it was never meant to climb, right? And we've got to learn, we've got to start to recognize people for how they've been created so that they can then be successful at what it is that God made them to do. And so
yes,
when we start to get into, let's talk about passion for a second, because you already mentioned it earlier. But just like I'm redefining and deconstructing this idea of genius, and then reconstructing it centered around passion, talent, and purpose. When I get to this idea of passion, I want to ask you, just like how I asked you about genius, like, what comes to mind when you hear this word passion? What words?
For me personally, in terms of work, I would say teaching and learning.
Okay.
But also the ability to find happiness and peace in whatever situation, to help others find that peace and happiness.
Yeah.
You know, I absolutely, I hate conflict. But at the same time, I know that some level of conflict is necessary.
It is though.
You know, like, I am more willing to stand up when it's others that I see that are facing injustice, than if it's myself.
Right.
Because I know that I feel like I have a pretty good self-image, and I feel good about myself, you know, like I've gotten my education, you know, certain things like that. Like, so I'm not really worried about some of that for me. But I don't always know how others feel. And I've always been willing to speak up for others, even if it means that I'm getting stuff back, because I always feel like I can handle it.
You take it. Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of have always been that way. And yeah, I mean, you've heard my dog as she's now laying all over this blanket that I've been working on, which she usually doesn't do. She doesn't usually lay on things that I'm working on, but she likes blankets also. But I have a pit bull, and I absolutely
named Giggles.
I do. I have a pit bull named Giggles.
I was thinking to myself, I'm like, she don't sound like a Giggles though, but okay.
No, until you meet her, and then the name's perfect for her. But you know, I hate, like, the stereotype, the stigma that's attached to them. And it's very similar to the stigma that's attached to Black men. And when you read about pit bulls in the media, it reads the same way as when there's like a Black man that supposedly has done something. Like, they're criminalized in a way that's just absolutely ridiculous. And you know, the natural temperament and nature of a pit bull is to be very affectionate and protective, especially with kids. Like, Giggles is honestly like the sweetest dog you could ever imagine. She is truly only aggressive about trying to make sure she gets her cuddles and she gets her food. But like, I mean, she is just not an aggressive dog. But, you know, because it's not the dog, it's the owner.
Right.
You know, people, again, it's about the systems. And, but like I want people to be able to see like the beauty within each other, within themselves, and to let go of some of these stereotypes.
Especially when it's misrepresenting and generalizing an entire group of people on account of what somebody else wants to define. Because most of the time, everybody has prejudices, right? And most of the time, the prejudices that we execute on other people is to make our world make sense. Like, it's safe if I go here, but it's not safe if I go here, because it's all about self-preservation, right? But in doing so, you now begin to put people in boxes that if you're unwilling to take them out of that box, once you meet that person, now there's a problem. Now we talked a little bit about the world being broken. Well, you mentioned something about wanting to go out and contribute to the world, but there's a need to contribute to the world because by and large it's broken. There's a lot of brokenness in the world, right? And that brokenness begins to then affect each of us in a negative way that traumatizes us. We're going back to this word traumatized. And once we're traumatized by a thing, that actually triggers our passion. Because you begin to talk about it. You was like, man, I hate prejudice. I hate that people have this prejudice stigma against, pit bulls, the same way that they have prejudices against, Black men and criminalizing them and making them sound like, monsters and whatever. And when you begin to tap into that, Alana, is when you begin to understand passion from a different perspective. Most of the people, when they think of passion, they think of love. Do what you love when it comes to your career and all that other type of stuff. But I learned from this book called The Assignment by Mike Murdoch that if you want to figure out what you were put on this planet, what God designed you to do, tap into your passion by tapping into what it is that you hate, though. It's a different way to think about it, right? Because that trauma that you experienced, whenever it was in your formative years, early on, whatever, that trauma represents something that impacted you in a negative way, that's broken in the world around you, that makes you feel less. It makes you feel like a fish out of water. You're like, I don't think I belong here. This system is making me feel like I don't belong here. And then eventually what happens is you're like, I hate this system though. I hate this feeling. And you become an advocate for other people though, who once you get older and you feel like, okay, I've managed it. I've gotten over this myself, but I still see this system operating and affecting other people in a negative way that don't have the ability to defend themselves. And I got to do something about it. I got to be a voice to the voiceless. I got to stand in harm's way. I got to do whatever I need to do to make sure that these people don't go through. I know what it's like. I know what it's like to be called this X, Y, and Z. And I'm not going to let another person go through that and experience it. That becomes the thing that drives you and compels you and moves you forward. I feel like even where you are now, from what you've told me a little bit that I've heard, I don't want to say that these people in this school drove you away, but I feel like you were like, you know what? I'm more effective outside of it, impacting the system outside of it than I am on the inside of it. I'm gonna leave, but I'm not leaving and putting this behind me. I'm still gonna be the same person I was, but I'm gonna do it in a way that I can affect change without all this system around me that's trying to suppress how it is that I'm built and how I respond to the environment around me.
Yeah, because physically, I can't do the things I used to do. My last year working as a principal, I started having issues with my knee, which resulted in 4 surgeries, including a knee replacement.
Okay.
And so I know, I physically am not who I was. And knowing who I believe I should be. And then there's also this whole autoimmune thing that I unfortunately deal with, which means for absolutely no reason, there's inflammation and pain. And then there's arthritis in my neck and my lower back. I can't be the support to my students the way I used to. I used to be able to be all over my classroom. I could bend down and help a kid. If I bend down, I might not get back up. So, I can't do that now. But it doesn't mean that I can't provide support in other ways. And I'm okay with that now. Yeah. It was a challenge at first, but I had to realize I can still serve the kids, my students, just in a different way.
Different capacity. Yeah.
And I can also still work within my passion, the teaching and learning, in a different way.
Yep.
I just do it in a faith-based environment now. So when I see adult women understanding concepts related to social justice and connecting that to their faith, and how they can take action and be advocates for certain issues, I feel good about that.
Yeah.
Because I know I'm helping and I'm serving. And so it's good. And it's okay. And it's okay. And it's okay that the people who are learning from me are not 12 years old anymore. Right. They may be 70 years old. And they're still thriving, and they're having those aha moments and realizing certain things about whether it's about race, our climate, the economy, or the combination of these things, and the connection to, like I said, our faith. I mean, I'm also learning and growing. Yeah. And I feel like, honestly, any good teacher should continue to learn and grow with their students and from their students. Yep. So I'm still being fulfilled from this as well, just as they are.
You know what's interesting though? Like, as you are encountering people, like you said, like 70-year-olds, because you've had this experience engaging people at the age of 12 in their formative years, a lot of times when we get traumatized by things in our life, we get stunted in our growth at that age, in that particular area, you know, emotionally, psychologically, whatever. And so even though you're engaging people at 70 years old, your experience with dealing with preteens is speaking to the preteen in them that was traumatized by something that disabled them from being able to grow more. And so you've been prepared for where you are now with what you've been through. And it's just beautiful how God orchestrates that.
Thank you.
Can I share something with you though?
Yes.
So when I had a chance to go to a middle school one time and engage some 10 little boys, third, fourth, and fifth graders, most of them were minorities. Third, fourth, and fifth graders were all put in one class for the whole day. So we talked about systems, we're going to talk about the school system.
This must have been a special education class.
You absolutely right. They were all on IEPs, you know. So the principal, you know, was a friend of mine. She was like, hey, can you just come talk to these kids for like, you know, an hour a week, like on a Friday? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So I was workshopping this whole concept of genius at the time. So I was like, I'm gonna talk to them about genius and see how they respond to that. So I went into the classroom, and one of the first things I said to them, I didn't ask them if they were a genius. I just told them they were geniuses. And they looked at me like, dude, you're in the wrong class. I don't think you know who you're talking to. Matter of fact, some of them got offended. And because they had these labels that have been put on them, you know, hey, you're emotionally disruptive, you got ADD, ADHD, whatever it is, all these negative affirmations, they were more accustomed to receiving negative reinforcement than the positive reinforcement that I came in with, to the point that they balked at me like, dude, you don't know who you're talking to. So I said, okay, that you're not receiving that, fine. I went to my next question, because then I started talking about this passion, but I started getting at it from the perspective of what it is that you hate. And if it's one thing that you can get any elementary, middle, or high school to talk about, it's like, if I ask you, like, what do you hate? Everybody got something to say, right? So I knew this would get them engaged. So I was like, well, all right, y'all, tell me what you hate then. Alana, can you guess what these 10 little boys who could never agree on anything, what to play with, when to play with it, though they never could get on the same page about things, they all universally told me the same thing that they hated. What do you think it was that they said they hated?
It was probably something about how the adults were talking to them and treating them, I'm thinking.
They said one word that represents what you just said. The establishment that was causing these adults to address them and to interact with them the way they did. It was school. It was like, we hate school, Mr. Key, now what? And they looked at me like, yeah, what you gonna do with that? We messed you up, didn't we? I said, actually, no, you didn't, because once you begin to understand that the thing that you hate is something that's broken in your environment, something that's broken in your school, something that's broken in the world, and your focus on it because you hate it, you've been given that attention because you were meant to fix it. Like it's broken. You are the one who keeps seeing it and keeps being impacted by it. And now you have to realize that when you begin to say, like, I hate school, it's because the school system isn't built the way it should be to respond to you. And in order for it to be fixed, I told them, I was like, you telling me that you hate school is letting me know that each of you is a future educator. And they were like, oh, snap, what you just say though? And I'm like, yeah, because educators are meant to fix the brokenness in the school system. And I said, let me tell you how specifically each of you is going to fix the school system. And so I started talking to them. I said, hey, look, the stuff that you've been told that you have ADHD, ADD, all these different labels, right? I'm like, in truth, what people are talking about is you have a different learning style. And I told them, like, look, I don't, they're in elementary school. They didn't know this. I was like, there's 8 different learning styles, but at most, schools are only teaching from 3. And so if you're not a visual learner, if you're not a verbal learner, and if you're not left-brained, which is where that math is, which is where, Einstein prevailed, and academics is where genius is located. If you're not learning from those 3 learning styles, then you're going to be made to feel like you don't fit in. You're going to be made to feel like you belong. The literal information that's being presented to you is going to sound like it's coming from a foreign language. And you'll be like, I don't understand what you're saying. I hate it here. Yep. Because you're feeling marginalized now. You're feeling like you don't belong now. But then I said, let's talk about some of these learning styles, though, that you most likely have, because you tapped into this earlier when you started talking about our children. Our children learn differently. And our children, but it's not a disability, though. It's their ability. So one of the learning styles is kinesthetic, which means you got to move. You got to be moving when you learn. If you're not moving, you're not processing information. But what happens when a kinesthetic learner is in the classroom and moving around? Hey, sit down, be still. Now you're suppressing their learning style. Let's say you're expeditionary or exploratory, which means you got to put your hands on stuff. But every time you go to put your hands on stuff, you're being told, hey, keep your hands to yourself. Stop that. Your learning style is being suppressed. Let's say you're a right brain thinker where you got to actually, you're creative, but your creative side is being suppressed because everything is coming from a logical perspective. Then you're going to hate the environment that's suppressing who you are. But instead of running away from that environment, if you then say, hey, look, I'm an educator and I'm meant to actually function on the inside of it and bring some wholeness to it. Now, as a teacher, you take your learning style, which then becomes your teaching style. And now you're going to reach the other people in the classroom who have the same learning style as you. And the information is going to click for them, because now you're representing a style that was absent before, and you're beginning to address the school system and fix the very thing that you hated.
Yeah. And at the same time, I sympathize with our teachers because of all that they're being asked to do.
Yeah.
And the lack of time and resources that they're being given. And then they're also being limited with the creativity that they're allowed to use within the classroom now.
Right.
But it's interesting because a lot of what you're saying, I bring up with my coworkers, because
I can tell.
My coworkers are not traditional educators. So a lot of these concepts are not as familiar to them, because, they went to seminary and, and so with me being the traditional educator, I'm saying to them, realize that a lot of the adults that we're working with don't know why they have struggled in school. They don't know why they've maybe struggled with learning something. So what we're going to make sure we do is we're going to make sure that we present the content in multiple ways. And we're going to make sure we present it in ways that are different than just lecture, because the way that people's go-to is lecture, especially when we're talking about adult learning. And that's because people often are not, people who are often doing a lot of the teaching or facilitation are not necessarily trained educators.
Trained, yeah.
They may know their content, and there's not usually a lot of training for them on how to facilitate differently and better.
Right.
So when people work with me closely, these are things that we talk about. And we talk about how to get them, how to get adults excited. And how adults are similar and different from kids. And I was like, adults are going to be more impatient than kids because they need to know that it's relevant immediately.
Right. Yeah.
I was like, they have less interest in doing things that are strictly academic. It needs to be applicable to whatever the purpose is. And so we talk about different ways, to present the content, to help people with learning, especially in a virtual environment, because, for the last several years, we've been within the pandemic. And people, some people push back, and the people who don't push back with me realize the differences that they have with the people, like in their workshops or their webinars and things like that, because it's just, it can be fun. Because one of the things that I had actually said, so I know we haven't specifically talked about where I work, but I worked for United Women in Faith, which was formerly United Methodist Women, which is the largest women's faith-based organization.
Okay.
And with that, we have so many well-meaning people. So many of my coworkers have, I'm not going to argue with them about the content. They know their content. I did not go to seminary. That's not my training. My training is in teaching and learning, and it doesn't matter what the content is.
Nope.
Because I tell them, I'm like, I've worked with teachers who teach Mandarin Chinese, and guess what? I don't speak it.
Yep.
And they're like, understood. So, and one of the things that has driven me a little bit crazy, probably more recently, is that when we're talking about learning in a faith-based scenario, everything is always so serious.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why does this have to be serious? I'm like, learning about our faith, talking about God, Jesus, all these things, this can be fun too.
Yeah,
who says this can't be fun? And people are like, yeah. I'm like, this doesn't have to be serious all the time.
Right.
I'm like, we can have a good time and talk about God. And they're like, yeah. And we've been intentionally incorporating more fun into things because, and I think people are more willing because the pandemic has been so depressing. It's been such just a draw for people that I wanted to be able to find more and different ways to spark joy and happiness. And I'm purposely saying joy and happiness because they are not the same. Nope. With our members and even with my coworkers, because we can't do that with our members if we can't do it with ourselves.
Hey.
So yeah, and I'm like, we need to have fun with this so we can, because I don't think God wants us to be so serious all the time.
He does not. If you look around, God has a huge sense of humor. So, the way some of these animals are built, and the way just if you just pay attention to how he interacts with others as children. I think about how I want to interact with my children, and I want to engage them and be fun with them. And I'm like, if I want to be fun with my kids, then God clearly as a father wants to be fun with us. He wants to get us to laugh and get us to have this joy and this happiness, right?
Mhm.
So I mean, it's a very real thing. And in fact, this is what caused me to invite you to this interview process, because I see like you're constantly evoking this happiness, this the ability to laugh on Facebook with all these memes that you post. And I was like, she's doing this very intentionally. And you even said it to some people, like there's not enough, there needs to be more of this sense of, hey, let's just have a moment to laugh. Let's just have a moment to breathe. Let's just have a moment. And I don't know where you find these memes. You find some stuff I ain't never seen before, but you're very skilled at finding these things. And it's not to say that this is your sole talent, because we're going to start talking about talent shortly. But the genius of knowing what it is that you're passionate about, like what drives you, like what it is that you hate. Once you figure out, like, okay, I want to address this brokenness in the world, the next logical question becomes, well, how do I do it though? And the thing of it is, your talent is your tool that God has given you to address the brokenness in the world. Because when you have something that's broken in your home and you figure out, I think I can fix this, the next thing you're going to look for is your tool, the right tool for the right job, right? And so I think about David and Goliath, because once we hone in on what is it that God has, and let me back up and say this. God sees the brokenness in his world, and it grieves his heart. And so what he does is he will grieve our hearts, each of us individually, with a portion of what grieves his heart to get us to do something about it. He's like, yeah, you feel that the way I feel that, do something about it. And then we'll look around like, well, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to do that, Lord? And he'll be like, what's in your hand? What have I given your family generationally as a talent that now is in your hand that you overlooking? Like, well, that's not that important. I've been doing that, right? Um, David and Goliath worked like that. David saw and heard this giant, because remember, we're talking about systems, and systems are big. Whenever we start focusing on what it is that we hate, it's never something small, because it's never something that's just a one-off that impacts one person. It impacts a group of people. So it's going to be large. So Goliath is talking smack for 40 days, right? And David is like, y'all not going to do nothing about this? Like, nobody else is bothered by this? We just going to, like, you know what, though? I'm going to do something. Like, he's not going to be disrespecting the God that I serve like that. Give me my, what did he ask for? He asked for the thing that he was used to dealing with. It was like, give me my slingshot. They tried to give him something else, though. The king Saul said, here, take my armor. And David's like, dude, I'm like a teenager. Why are you giving me a grown man armor? And that's what people try to do with us, right? Hey, look, you're supposed to do this way. You're supposed to react to this way. I need you to operate in this way. And we have to be cognizant enough of who we are to say, nope, that's not what's going to make things happen for me. Mm-hmm. He's like, look, I've been killing bears and lions with this slingshot. Give me this slingshot and 5 smooth stones, and I'm gonna show you what I'm gonna do to this giant. And we know what happened. The giant fell, and then David was able to lop this joker's head off. He was like, problem solved. Now what? There's other giants in the land. Let me get at them too. Matter of fact, I'm gonna show people how to be equipped to handle this, right? And that's what genius begins to do. It doesn't matter how big the system is, whatever it is that we're opposing, that we're up against. We will chip away at it. We don't care if we get paid for it. We will do this because, like somebody said, it's like the gas in your tank. It drives you forward. But it drives you forward identifying and gripping this tool that God has given you in your talent. I mean, if you think about Moses, right? God told Moses, hey, look, I need you to go to Egypt, the place that you grew up in, right? And that you ran from because you killed somebody, because you got angry. I need you to go back and release all of my people, all your people. He's like, yeah, I stutter, right? It's like, dude, like I made your mouth first and foremost. But since you got a problem with it, go back and you're going to find your brother. He's going to speak on your behalf. And then did Moses stop though? He kept talking smack. Like, nah, I don't think you understand. Like, this is not going to work. And God was just like, what's in your hand though? He was like, I just got this rod. This my normal rod. He was like, put it on the ground. You know what happens? He put it on the ground. It turns into a snake. He said, grab it by the tail. He grabs it by the tail. It turns back into a rod. He's like, this is how you're going to deliver my people. This is how I'm going to perform mighty, miraculous works by this little rod in your hand. And that's how God gives us this idea of, you have something, your talent that I've given you, that God has given us, that's going to help you address this giant that's in your life and in the lives of other people. And it's going to have you be the head and not the tail, right? Mm-hmm. And so, my question to you, Alana, is like, what do you see as your talent?
I think I have a couple of talents.
I think you do too.
Um, I like to well, one thing is, which has kind of like always kind of been there, is the ability to make people laugh.
Yep.
Like I tell people, I'm like, I am not a person who can come up with jokes. I am funny in like situational ways.
Okay.
Like in terms of like if I needed to say something, it's just like the little comment here and there.
Mm-hmm.
And I do love memes. I think they are hilarious. And you know, and there was a point where I don't remember what the meme was, but there was somebody who had posted something one day, and I just thought it was so funny, and I shared it and said, "This is it. This is the best one that I've seen today, like the meme of the day."
Mm-hmm.
And there were comments on it, and occasionally, like before that, I would have shared things here and there, but for some reason, people connected to that.
Yeah.
And it was like there seemed to be a need for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, all right.
Saw the need.
I was like, I guess I got to keep looking for memes.
Yeah.
And then I realized how many people that I knew were looking at them, even if they didn't comment or click one of the reactions.
Yeah.
And it was, you know, friends, family, and some of our members. And that's part of the reason why I use some of like the Christian themed memes, because I want them to feel really engaged in the content of the memes.
Yeah.
And that's why I try not to go too far, you know, like with something that they might feel is inappropriate.
Yeah.
Because
I really appreciate them, by the way. I don't know if you can tell, but I do. I really appreciate
I can tell, and I appreciate that, like you and I have like developed like this dialogue,
right.
With it, and it's interesting because there are multiple people who send me memes as a result.
Mm-hmm.
Like privately, either they text them or send them to me in Messenger, and they're like, "Here's one that would be good," and it's interesting how it's like help develop like some kind of like relationship with people.
Yeah.
And I think people needed that, especially with the pandemic, where people felt very isolated.
Yep.
And like, and I think about our members with our organization, because, you know, we're all over the country, and we've only had like one significant in-person event since the pandemic. And I wasn't even there because I was overseeing the virtual component of that event. And, you know, people, a lot of people know me for the memes. Some people know me for the memes. Some people know me for my t-shirts. Mm-hmm. And then many people know my dog. Like I'm on Zoom, and like I might have my camera off because I'm not usually on camera when I'm on Zoom, like in people's meetings, because I love the fact that my job allows me to be more of a support for other people. But when people notice that I'm there, they're like, "Alana, how's Giggles? Is she here?" And I'm like, "She's good." I mean, or if I'm planning something with one of our conferences, and they'll ask me, "Will Giggles be at the event in April?" And I'm like, virtually? No. I mean, like she'll be around, but
time out though. I just caught, because you know I'm a wordsmith. I'm always playing around with words, and I just caught the double entendre of what you just said. Like you said, will Giggles be at the convention? And they're talking about your dog, but in truth though, because of what you bring, it's really like also asking, will there be laughter at the convention, right? Because there's this element that you bring. Because when you can make somebody laugh, you see what I did there? You see, But when you can bring laughter into a serious situation, you are, and you mentioned it, situational comedy, sitcom, that's what the word means. But you disarm people. And once people are disarmed of their defenses, it allows them to learn something that they otherwise would not have been willing to learn.
Yes, that is very true.
And so what you're doing is very much positioning people to learn something that they otherwise would have been resistant to.
Yes. And and an example of that, one of like the big things that we do is what we call Mission U, and there are different studies. And a few years ago, one of the studies was based on the book Push Out. Are you familiar with that?
No.
So Push Out is actually the reason why I bought this T-shirt.
Okay.
So I could wear it when I was facilitating the study. It's about the criminalization of Black girls in schools.
Oh, okay.
It's an amazing read. It's a powerful, like, emotional read. But and one of the things that I did tell them up front was like, this is heavy content, but we're still going to have fun while we're doing the study.
Yep.
And so like we would have like our icebreakers would like be something silly, like identifying like what our theme song would be for the day or whatever, stuff like that. And Giggles usually would make an appearance because she likes being by my side. Like, she's totally spoiled by the fact that I work from home. But I'm spoiled by the fact that she's the greatest dog in the world. So, we're like a package deal. And I think people enjoy that because of some of the silliness. Like, I'll dress her up on Halloween. My coworkers get to see her, and they enjoy it. They look forward to her costumes, and so do our members. But we can talk about the situation of what is happening with Black girls in schools and still find a reason in that day to laugh. It doesn't mean that we're laughing about the content.
Right.
But, I truly believe it's important that, like, we all find a reason to laugh every day, because there's so much bad stuff everywhere.
Yeah.
You don't even have to leave your house to find it. You could just look at your phone or whatever, but it's there. And, and if people are struggling to find it, it's part of the reason for the memes. And, and I know, like, my mom, who is my dad's caretaker, because my dad has dementia. My mom is not an animal person, but she loves pictures of Giggles. And she is actually, like, 2 weekends ago, she let Giggles in the house, but we were confined to one room. But, like, you don't understand, like, this was huge.
That's huge, right? I see it a little bit.
Yeah, and she even said, she was like, she said she was so amazed at how good she was. And she was even telling, like, her friends, because, like, she like, my mom really likes my dog. And, like, so me sending her pictures and telling her silly things about Giggles, like, I'll call her using the voice of Giggles and, and act like Giggles is telling on me for something. And she loves it. And it actually sometimes calms her because of the stress she's feeling as the caretaker.
The caretaker, right. See, and this is what I knew, Alana. I was like, you are very intentional about bringing, like you said, because of what we've been through over the past 2 years, people are looking for. Sometimes we tend to throw up our hands and say, you know what though, like Facebook is just evil, and it's evil if you allow it to be evil, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's destructive if you allow it to be destructive by removing yourself from it. But if you say, you know what, I have a purpose. I'm very specific about why I post certain things on Facebook, right? I want Facebook to show family situations, and I want Facebook to show my faith, right? But these different components that we flood the social media with allow people who are searching to find something that'll brighten their day, give them new perspective, right? And renew their minds, and then and then if we can get a message on the inside of it that's subtle enough that, you're being very specific about this book and the pipeline that you're talking about from schools to prisons for Black men and Black women. And there are some people who are responsible for this, in their, what's the word? In their acceptance of the status quo. When you begin to address it, it's going to make them feel defensive. But when you come in with the humor first, even though I know what we're going to be talking about today, but what are we doing for this icebreaker though? Again, it disarms them to then receive information and then begin to accept it, internalize it. And then, you've moved from being someone who was defensive to someone who's now possibly an ally. One thing I wanted to say about your shirt, when you talk about the incarceration, those 10 young boys that I told you about, they were incarcerated, not just physically, but mentally. In their mind, they were incarcerated to this way of thinking that the way I exist, the way I function in the school system is unacceptable and I don't belong here. I wanted to just touch on that. It doesn't necessarily have to do with what we're talking about right now, but I didn't want to let this interview end without having mentioned that, because what I see you as a person that does is, again, it's getting attention, not for the sake of bringing it to yourself, but bringing it to a subject matter, a situation that is important. So if you can put something on your shirt, if you can put something on a screen that's going to cause somebody to be like, oh snap, like what is that saying? And then give them pause to then reconstruct how they're processing something. That's like priceless, right?
Yeah.
And in truth, like getting to the end of the equation, our purpose in life, your purpose is to figure out what talent that you possess as a tool to then use it to address the brokenness that's driving your passion, revolving around something that you hate. And so that's how I see you unlocking your genius, Alana. You're already like in the midst of it. You're thriving in it. And I just want, sometimes it takes for somebody outside of you to say, yeah, you know what you're doing is genius, right? For you to be like, oh, snap, I never even, this is what I do, right? It's just
you're often doing something right when there are a lot of people who enjoy it, but there are some people who are critiquing it and criticizing it and trying to stop it.
Absolutely.
Like for example, like I told you, I crochet. And I love to crochet. And the act of crocheting is a calming thing for me. But if I kept everything I crocheted, I'd be living like a hoarder.
Right.
So, and during the pandemic, I learned how to start making the stuffed animals and stuff.
Oh, snap. Okay.
Which I've actually gotten pretty good at. But some people don't understand why I don't sell them. Okay. I mean, I would, if somebody comes to me and says, can you make this for me? I will pay you. Which is very different than me setting up an Etsy shop. One, I'm going to get bored making the same things over and over again. Right. And I'd rather be like, no, you're going to get this. But I know I can't do that, but I don't want to do that. I want to be able to give a gift and give a gift of love. And to me, that's more important than making a few dollars, because I was going to crochet anyway, but I don't want to crochet on somebody else's schedule. I don't want it to ever feel like work.
Yeah. Isn't it funny how people try to impose their will and their thoughts on what you're doing? That's like Saul. Saul was like, here, David, take my armor. He's like, nah, dude, I'm gonna die. If I go out here with this heavy armor, I'm not going to come back alive. You got to know what it is that defines you, so that when someone else tries to define you, you're like, no, thank you, but no thanks. Right? That's so important.
All right. And I understand about giving away your gifts and talents for free and just and not allowing yourself to be taken advantage of, but that's not it, because this is my choice. You know, like, this is something I'm choosing to do, which would be very different than like helping someone write a curriculum for free. You know, like, that would be work. That's a different kind of,
right.
that's a different kind of thing. But I get a different kind of joy and pleasure out of like the crocheting. Until, you know, Giggles tells me that she's had enough of me crocheting and I have to stop.
Right.
But she likes it when I make something for her too. So
I bet she does.
mm-hmm.
Well, look, this has been fascinating. We could keep going, I could tell, but I don't want to keep you too long beyond what I told you I would do today with this interview. But I feel validated for two reasons. One, what I saw, I feel like you confirmed it with what we've been talking about over the past hour. And two, I've been smiling for the past week because for a while I would tag you in stuff and you wouldn't respond. But now it's like for the past week, you've been responding to some of the stuff I've been tagging her. So I'm like, oh yeah, I feel good now. I must be giving her some good memes. Like, oh yeah, that's a good one. So
it may just be that like I just didn't like pay attention to like the stuff in the notifications.
No, it's cool. I'm just messing with you. I'm just saying.
Or like, or it's a bad pain day or a headache day.
I feel like it just led up to this happening. So, you know, I want to thank you for doing what you do, for being who you are. I want to thank you for taking the time out to come talk to me. And I mean, I want to end the interview the same way I started, to see if you know what I've said has had any impact on you. So, Alana, like, would you consider yourself now to be a genius?
That's so hard to say because
It's hard to say, I know.
I think I wouldn't necessarily, I still wouldn't call myself a genius. I think that I have gifts and talents and skills that God has provided me. And I'm just doing what he's called me to do, which is share them.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't call that genius. I would just say I'm just doing what I'm being led to do.
And that's fair. That's absolutely fair. I'm not gonna like hold you hostage and make you call yourself a genius before we get off. I do want to. I'll end with this though. Sometimes, you know, when we think about humility and what it means to be humble, we tend to focus on one side of the spectrum, which is to not think too highly of yourself. But the other end of the spectrum is not to think too lowly of yourself either, because when you do what it is that God has designed you to do, you're tapping into the mind of Christ that we all have as part of the body of Christ, which means you're tapping into his way of thinking for you, which is another way of thinking of your genius. And so when you're, you know, we've been talking a lot in my church about, hey, if you want to find joy, don't look for joy to be in the result of what you're doing. Look for joy to come from your obedience to God. Because when you actually use your talent the way the God-given talent that you've been entrusted with, when you use it in the way that he has designed for you to use it, that's a form of obedience. That's a form of responding to his word. And that's where the joy should come from. You're like, I know that this is what he's giving me this for, and I find joy in that. And so as someone who is an instigator of joy and of happiness, I just want you to see that in your picking up what God has given you and addressing some of the issues that you see around you, some of the situations that you see around you, you are in fact being obedient to God's talent in you. And for me, as I see it, you're operating in your genius.
Well, I appreciate that, because I feel like the reason why a lot of the things I do improve is because I follow where I'm led. And so therefore he continues to provide.
Absolutely.
And like, it's not just me. Like, I'm not doing this by myself. Nope. Like he's allowed me to do this and given me the tools and the ability, because like several years ago when I was really just kind of like crocheting for my own benefit, or like truly just like, I don't want to just say like for my own benefit, but it wasn't it wasn't really what it is now. Like I had to stop for a few years because I was having a lot of issues with my hands.
Yeah.
Which actually led to the diagnosis of the autoimmune disease that I have. But he's allowed me to be in a better place where I don't suffer the same way I did, so that I'm able to do more. And right now I'm making multiple blankets so that the unit at our church can take them to the Methodist hospital to give them to people that are there, because the majority of the women at our church are significantly older and are not capable of making the blankets now. So even though my mom harasses me on a daily basis about how many do I have, I'm like I'm going to make multiple. Like the one that I was telling you about the other day, that one's done, and I'm almost done a second one.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, when you're obedient, you have no idea where God is going to take it. All he asks for, just take the one step. And then all of a sudden you look up and you're being told, well done, thy good and faithful servant. You've been faithful for a few things. I will now make you ruler over many. And I see that for you and what you've been telling me, both in the academic and educational arena, and now with this faith-based community and the crocheting that you're doing, and the topics that you're bringing to people to help them understand better what's going on around them that might not necessarily impact them, but that they as believers should be aware of and should be doing something about. Because God put us on this planet because of the brokenness to begin to mend the world and fix it and bring it back to its original state. And so I see what you're doing as a part of that. So,
and I appreciate that. And, you know, a lot of that content is driven by many of my coworkers. My role as the distance learning coordinator is to support their work and to help spread that and enhance their work. So they're like the masterminds, if you want to think of it that way. And I'm helping to spread it. So they may be the producers of the seeds, and I'm helping to sow it. If you want to think about it that way.
One sows, one waters, God provides the increase. And again, I'm gonna say this one last thing about genius, and I'm gonna leave it alone. That's how genius works, though, because genius is not about I can do all things, I can do everything. Everything I touch was like, no, within your wheelhouse, you're a subject matter expert. And then when you get beyond your wheelhouse, you're like, okay, who can do this part? And then someone else that's operating in their genius says, I can do this. And now you're coming together as a community that is operating in their individual genius to perform a function that you could not do individually by yourself.
Exactly. Because like you said, like we can't all do everything, because the fish can't climb the tree. And even if the fish could, it doesn't mean the fish wants to.
Right. So look, check it. This has been Manu Forti Ministries presents Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny. I am your host, motivational speaker, publisher, author, Reggie Key, and this has been my genius guest, Alana Rawls. Alana, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this week's episode. Make sure you pick up the book, Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny, by my dad, Reggie Legend, available on Amazon and at inkwellspoken.com. Connect with us at Inkwellspoken on all social media platforms. If you enjoy our content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload.